going to talk about recruitment. Now, this is a huge, huge topic. Now, I already see these eager faces from my co-hosts here. They're all like, yeah, let me just jump on this bandwagon. But before I let you go into it, what I would like to know from each of you is one of your recruitment horror stories. Now, the reason for this is we could sit here and we could just talk about recruitment, but every decision that we make at this moment in time is based upon the experiences we have in the past. It's based upon the fails that we've had and the successes. That's how you grow. So what I want to know from you is a recruitment horror story and why it was a horror story for you. And then we'll talk a little bit about recruitment itself, types of recruitment, being recruited, being on the other side of the podium where you're doing the recruitment. And we will even tackle that dreaded question. Should there be an application and interview process to get into a guild or a community? But horror stories first, and since somebody looks really, really, really eager, I'm going to pick on you, Screen.
Fair enough. Recruitment horror stories, to be honest, recruitment horror stories for me have been pretty much the same sort of issue most of the time. It generally tends to be around the people having the wrong expectations of your guild. So I don't have any particular one-off horror stories because we're generally relatively upfront about what we want. So our biggest problems in terms of recruitment usually fall at the first hurdle, and it's usually, oh, do I have to install TeamSpeak? No, I've said it 3 times on the recruitment post because you don't actually have to do it. And oh, I'm not that big a raider. I prefer to do PvE. I prefer to do PvE. Well, we're a PvP focused guild. Or I couldn't be. Do I have to fill in an application form? Yes, that's what the application form's there for. Really, we don't have any major horror stories in terms of recruitment, but you get general stupidity at the end of the day, and it generally comes through and falls at that first hurdle, and that is the reason for these hurdles for interviews and for application forms. But I got a funny feeling that Blank has probably got a better one than that.
See, I just imagine Blank has a ton of horror stories, especially since we did get into that whole Skype conversation for gold in the very first episode we had. So I'll let Blank rest a little bit. Vistohlm, have you had any recruitment horror stories?
No, like when I started out with the hindsight of 2020, that's pretty much the only nightmarish recruitment fiasco that I had to deal with. After that, I didn't really put myself in a role to, have to go through that again. On either end, be it from a player standpoint or from the guild hierarchy. Everything since then has pretty much been what I've wanted out of gaming, and I've made sure that I wasn't going to let the game dictate what it was I was doing and how I was enjoying it, and that took a long, long time to get through.
I think that's something that you find. There's a similarity I've got from Vist's situation is the guild I was in previous to helping form Afterlife. We were the fallout from a major drama from another guild lead, and that gives you that hindsight 2020 when you're not in charge, but you have to see something just go. And when you see that, you've got that hindsight to be able to just step back from and go, right, well, that's not happening where I'm coming from, and you set those boundaries when you start, and then you generally don't come across, gold for stuff.
Fair enough. Do you want to go, Blank, or do you want me to go?
I need you to go because I'm trying to pick which one that I can either is far enough back that it doesn't look bad on me, or it's close enough that somebody doesn't come to the website and they're like, you told the story about blah, 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 blah. And so I'm like,
fair
just
enough.
Remember, Blank, cable TV.
Okay, so a horror story from my past. It would have to be sort of similar to what you went through, Vistohlm. The guild that I originally started out with, the first guild that I was in died out because the officer corps literally vanished one day and never showed up again. And to this day, I still don't know what happened to them. So the people who were in the guild said, screw it, we'll go start our own guild. And me being the progressive one, I started the guild. We kept it sort of friends and family kind of a dealio. The recruitment horror story for me was the fact that we let people in just based on the fact that they knew somebody. We didn't test their personality. We didn't ask them questions. We didn't have a culture decided for how we wanted our guild to be. We just sort of were like, let's just have people join. It'll be fun. That, I think, led to a really nasty fallout that started the downfall of that particular guild. And I take full responsibility for that one, because as the leadership, the one who sits at the top, any decision that impacts the guild is always going to end up on my shoulders. I will state, though, that, you know, what you were saying, Vistohlm, is when you're not in that position where you're not sitting at the leadership board of how a guild functions, you don't see everything that is occurring that can make that guild disseminate. And I know for me, I think it was probably really hard when I disbanded that guild. That was the 300-plus guild that I was in charge of, because I just went, you guys, go find something else better. Find a culture that's going to fit you. I am done with this. I need to rethink my priorities here. And the amount of people, I'd say 80% of the people had no clue something was wrong. But we didn't foster a community of communication. We didn't have that culture built in. So they had no clue that the people sitting at the top were basically losing their hair and going gray from all that was going on around them. So for me, the horror story was just letting anybody in, because we ended up getting some people that I had to remove quickly because they were racist or sexist, and I don't tolerate that. So not having those rules set down in place to start, not having a way to test for them, quick destruction for me. So what about you, Blank? I love your stories. This should be great.
I sorted out. I went through the old mental file cabinet. I think I found one appropriate. It actually will tie into what we're talking to later. So 2 internet host points for me here. I was a part of a progression hardcore raiding guild back in my WoW days, and we were the top of our server and highly ranked. Now, we will talk a little bit about the guild treadmill. What had happened, what always does with attrition, is somebody has school or they can't make attendance. As it goes with bigger guilds, you can't make your attendance, and it's not like I missed attendance once because I had a car wreck or, you know, whatever. You don't make attendance, you don't get to raid. So somebody wasn't able to raid, and we looked internally and had nobody to fill a spot, so we looked in the server. We always, you know, we always called this fishing, you know, in the smaller ponds. Hey, who's out there can do whatever? And it actually, I was the one that was in charge of it, but it was funny for me to watch. Progression content at the time may have been like Serpentine Cavern, whatever. These are very difficult fights that are, you know, other guilds are working on trying to get them down, working on Lady. And it was just one of those times where somebody comes in and they're like, hey, you know, I'm going to work really hard. Oh, you've got extra stuff? Can I get some of that? And you're like, oh, you know, no big deal, sure. They were handed stuff. They were handed gear. They got the, you know, that knocked the boss down, shown how to do the fight. Best part, the person then went and traded up somewhere else. Like, got his transfer paid for and went somewhere else for a higher rate, for a higher rating. Like, oh, top 100 is nice, but I'd like to be top 25. I have the achievement. I know the fight. I know this. I use my gear. Pay for me to come here. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And I was like, you start thinking that your server, you know, is the top dog, and then you watch some, you pick out of your server to get this great raid group, and then the dude's like, peace, they're gonna pay for my stuff, I'm going over here. So having a really good recruitment and a way to make sure in place that people don't just come in, grab loot, and then bounce. Because even if you're the highest on your server, there's always a little greener grass somewhere else for those really hardcore people. So